Q&A edition of the Patriots Beat podcast. And Alex, as we wait for some people to trickle in here and start asking questions, and please do drop your questions in the chat. We do want to talk quarterbacks like always, but we also want to talk about some other options for the Patriots outside of quarterback, since we're so quarterback heavy most of the time. But Alex, we wanted to open with Carson Wentz trade, obviously going to Indianapolis for a second round pick and
it's a third
and a conditional second that could turn into a first if he
will likely become a first.
Right. So with that in mind, I think the first place to start is that the Patriots easily could have made this trade, right? If they wanted Carson Wentz, they had the draft capital, they had the financial means to do it against the salary cap. They could have traded for Carson Wentz, and Bill Belichick looked at Carson Wentz, at least at that price tag, and said, no thanks. So I think our initial reaction to it should be, how do we feel about that? How do we feel about the fact that Bill Belichick decided to pass on Carson Wentz? Because he easily could have gotten into the running here and potentially outbid Indianapolis if they really wanted the player.
So, yeah, I mean, let's have this conversation again, right? How do we feel about them passing on Wentz? As a whole, I feel good because I think they should pass on this whole group of quarterbacks. Mariota, Wentz, Carr, Garoppolo, Cousins, all the cast-offs. I want nothing to do with those guys. That being said, if it was passing on Wentz to go get Mariota or to go get Garoppolo, that sucks. Because of that group, Wentz was the most attractive option. I think when you look at that group, the most important thing is upside. In Wentz, and I don't think you'll disagree with me, or many people will disagree with me, of all those quarterbacks, Wentz has the highest upside. And frankly, I don't think it's that close. You'd hate to think the reason they didn't get involved is because they don't have that true third-round pick this year because of the videotaping scandal last year. I'd like to think there's ways they could have made it happen around that, but you never know. So again, overall, I'm happy because I don't want them going out and getting some cast-off. I don't think that's the answer to what ails them at quarterback. But if they were going to get a cast-off, which it sounds like is the plan, Wentz was the guy. You know, if they pass on all of them, I'll look back at this and be like, that's great. That was awesome. They didn't get involved in any of this. But again, Wentz would have been, I think it was a really good deal. I do. I think it was a really good deal for the Colts. They didn't give up a ton. Or I'll let you, I guess. Why don't you give your thoughts overall on the Patriots, and then I'll talk about more of the trade itself.
No, I really like the trade for the Colts as well. I think the biggest obstacle to overcome if you're the Patriots is it's not only just $25 million against the cap this year, it's guaranteed $22 million against the cap in 2022 as well. So the Indianapolis Colts have hitched their wagon to Carson Wentz for at least the next 2 years. It's actually a 4-year deal, but there's not guaranteed money in year 3 and year 4, so you can get out of it a little bit easier. But they've basically hitched their wagon to Carson Wentz for, I would say, at least 2 years in terms of guaranteed money, maybe even 3 based off of the structure of the contract, unless they really want to eat a big dead cap number. So they must really believe in him. And I think the difference between what the Patriots could offer Carson Wentz and what the Colts could is that the Colts have Frank Reich, his former quarterbacks coach, as their head coach now. And I'm sure that they feel a lot better about their evaluation and what they know of the person of Carson Wentz's work ethic, the behind the scenes stuff, and anything that anybody else could have known because of all the institutional knowledge that they have of Philadelphia from Frank Reich. So Frank Reich obviously still believes in Carson Wentz a little bit because he got offered this trade to Philadelphia, and he also is paying the contract for the next couple of seasons. So there is some hope there, I think, from Frank Reich's perspective. But Wentz was always a difficult fit for me because, first of all, he's running in a West Coast offense his entire career. And West Coast offense that's very, very heavy in college concepts, RPOs, vertical passing concepts. He was a high-volume, deep passer in that big season in 2017. And more so, he was an out-of-structure player when he was at his best. Somebody that really liked to scramble around and make plays with his legs and extend plays and then throw the ball down the field. And I don't know if that type of playing style was exactly what the Patriots were looking for. And a lot of people in Philadelphia, and whether it was just Doug Peterson kind of getting his shots in the way out or not, a lot of people in Philadelphia were frustrated by the fact that Carson Wentz would not stay in structure with the offense and run the scheme and allow the scheme to do most of the heavy lifting. He wanted to be a playmaker. He wanted to be Russell Wilson. He wanted to run around for 3.5 seconds and throw the ball deep. The Patriots don't want that style of quarterback. And I think that ultimately...
But isn't that what Cam is?
He's
What do you
definitely
mean
more
they don't
run
want
around.
that? That's the whole thing they preached with Cam and all
The
the
run
Cam
around
people.
style. Cam's not a scrambler though. Like
But
Cam.
that he can extend plays and he can make magic and this and that. No, I don't look. I don't necessarily disagree with anything you said up until that point. But I mean, I'm on the record as saying I think that the Patriots offense kind of needs a bit of an overhaul. So again, is this an excuse to do it? The way I see Wentz is he's basically a rookie quarterback to me in that the physical tools are there, but how's he going to pick up a new system? What's the mental element going to look like, for a rookie in the NFL for Wentz at his new stop? So if you're the Colts and they're either picking, I think it's 19th or 20th, I forget. They're back to back with the Bears. But if you're picking down there, Kyle Trask is probably the only one of the top quarterbacks you have a shot at, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to give up a ton. Even for Mac Jones, you're going to have to give up a lot. And then obviously the other guys, it just gets exponentially more. So it goes down to, do you want to give up that draft capital to draft one of the rookies, or do you want to give up the salary cap to take Wentz? Like, I look at Wentz essentially as a rookie quarterback as he comes in. And I think the task and to the steps ahead to getting him to succeed is kind of similar to what you would do with a rookie. So again, for the Colts picking down at 20th, yeah, if they'd rather sacrifice the cap than the draft capital, and that's personal preference, I think it makes a ton of sense. Even for the Patriots at 15, where they'll probably have a shot at Mac Jones, that's what it comes down to. Do you want, the guy you don't have to pay, but you have to give up a ton of picks? Or for the Patriots, they could just make the pick. So that's why I think it's a better deal for the Colts and the Patriots. But again, I just look at Wentz as kind of a rookie. It's essentially like you're bringing in a rookie. You're going to have to do the same things. And for what they gave up, right? Again, would you rather give up the first, the third, and $20 million in cap space for Wentz, or like 2 firsts and 2 seconds to move up and get Trey Lance? Like, that's what it comes down to. And I don't think that Wentz is the wrong answer in that question. I think, it depends on what you want to do as an organization. I don't think there is a wrong answer. There's pros and cons to each, but, I think this made a ton of sense. And I think a similar move again with Wentz because of the upside might have made sense for the Patriots. I would stay away from all of them. Again, I would stay away from all of them. But if there was one, Wentz was one, and that's why, because he's essentially a rookie quarterback.
Right, and I think the point that you made about the Colts picking where they're picking as a playoff team, remember a few years ago, Bill Belichick said, well, we're not going to scout guys at the top of the draft because it's not realistic for us to trade all the way up to draft one of those guys. So the Colts had to look at it like, okay, we're not going to be able to pick Zach Wilson in this draft. We would love to pick Zach Wilson or Trey Lance or Justin Fields, but moving all the way up from where they're at to get into the running for a player like that was probably unrealistic, especially given all the quarterback needy teams ahead of them that had better draft capital to invest in that type of move up. So from their perspective, I get it. I want to talk about the domino effect though, because now all of a sudden you have a situation in Philly where I think they do believe a little bit in Jalen Hurts, but they're sitting at 6 without a real sure thing at quarterback, without a franchise QB anymore. Then the Carolina Panthers are obviously sitting there at 8 without a franchise quarterback either. And I know that the Panthers, they tried to get Stafford. They were the runner-up for Matthew Stafford, and they're going to be very, very aggressive in the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes if he does come available. So the domino effect, basically, that this presents to the Patriots, I think it makes it really interesting for them. And we talked about on Tuesday that trading up in the draft for a quarterback's probably not the route that they're going to go anyways. But if that is something that they would entertain, now that the fact that they might need to actually leapfrog Philadelphia at 6 adds another sort of wrinkle into that plan.
And then I would just add, in terms of the domino effect on the other side, I thought Wentz was the best option in that group. So if he's going for a first and a third, you shouldn't give up any more, I think, than just a third for Marcus Mariota. I would want a pick back with Garoppolo at this point to take on that contract. I'm talking about Garoppolo and a third for like a 6th now. So after the Stafford trade, when we thought, oh, these quarterbacks are going to be so expensive, and then we heard, multiple firsts for Wentz and all of that. So that's out the window now. So these quarterbacks are going to be more affordable because this, and outside of Watson, this does nothing to Watson's value. Deshaun Watson is his own thing. I think 4 first-round picks is still the beginning of the conversation there. But for everybody else, this totally resets the market to the Patriots' advantage.
Yeah, I think I would be surprised still if Philadelphia goes quarterback at 6, although I think that's what they probably should do. That's probably the best route.
I think you have to give, if you moved on from a guy who was described as the franchise, if you moved on from him, you have to give the guy who replaced him a shot. You have to give Hurts a shot, like a real shot.
You have to evaluate it. To me, you have to look at it and say, okay, we're sitting here at 6 on draft night, and Trey Lance is still on the board. The other 3 quarterbacks are gone. Our evaluation is it Trey Lance versus Hurts, who's the better player? And Hurts has only got 1 year in the NFL, so it's almost like you can make that comparison. It's similar to what the Cardinals did when they sat there and said, "Is Kyler Murray a better quarterback prospect than Josh Rosen?" Right? Those are the kind of conversations that you do need to have and take seriously if you're Philadelphia. I personally would say that there's a really good chance that the scouts and Howie Roseman in the player personnel department in Philadelphia is going to say, we have a much higher grade on Trey Lance this year than we had on Jalen Hurts last year. But maybe the coaching staff, maybe the other people in the room, the owners, whatever, really like Hurts and want to kind of give him a chance, and maybe they talk themselves out of it. But if you're just going to look at it apples to apples and say, okay, we had Hurts graded like this last year, he graded like this for us during the season in the games that he played, and then we have Trey Lance graded as a surefire top 10 pick. I don't know how you pass on that player in the draft this year just because you have a guy that you kind of like that you drafted in the 2nd round last year.
But at the same time, you look ahead and you have a strong quarterback class next year. You can use that pick. You can either trade down and pick up another pick next year. You can use that pick on an asset, a wide receiver, Jamar Chase, Devonta Smith.
That you're going to pick as high as 6 next year?
Well, that's the thing. Either
that's the
you're not picking as high, but here's the thing. Either you're not picking as high as 6 because Jalen Hurts played well, or you got your answer, Jalen Hurts sucked, and you're back in the top 10.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're willing to kind of have a 1-year experiment, and then again, if you use that 6th pick on a wide receiver, that still helps the quarterback you get next year.
Right.
And it's a good quarterback class next year. We've got Sam Howell. We've got Spencer Rattler. We've got Phil Jurkovec. I mean, the ACC is loaded. Like, I wouldn't mind punting to next year.
The fear that you worry about is that Jalen Hurts is good enough to get you where the Patriots are right now, and you end up picking 15th.
But then I guess again, so maybe you don't use that 6th pick on a wide receiver, but if you trade that pick down, if you trade out of that spot for another team who wants a quarterback, right? Then you have 2 first-round picks next year, and then maybe your 2 first-round picks are like 15 and 18, but 15 and 18 gets you in the top 10. 15 and 18, I think, gets you in the top 5. So there's ways to safeguard that.
Teams like Atlanta and Philadelphia are great examples of, you hope as an organization you're never going to pick that high again. Not never, but you're not going to pick that high again anytime soon. And you have one chance. I would say Miami's in a similar boat as well, is that they've picked really high in the last 2 drafts, and they're hoping that they're building upwards, and they obviously weren't picking that high with their own pick. They're picking that high with Houston's pick. Right. And at some point you do have to realize, okay, we might never pick number 3. It could be 20 years before we're number 3 again. And that's a good thing. Right. But you may only have a chance at that blue chip, stud franchise, whatever word you want to use, quarterback. You might only have one chance at it, because the next year you might not be in that position again. Well, let's move on to some of these other questions here. Gareth Hahn brought up a prediction from Field Yates, I should say, that Marcus Mariota will be the starter next year in New England. Field Yates did a article with predicting all 32 starters in the league, and he had Marcus Mariota going to the Patriots, and he said it was unlikely but still an option that Cam Newton resigns with New England. And Field is really, really tapped into the Patriots, so I trust a lot of his reporting in that sense. But we've talked about Mariota a bunch. I'm all for Mariota. I know you're a little bit more lukewarm than me, but this is, I think, is a really serious discussion that the Patriots internally have to be having of whether or not they're interested in Mariota, because the Raiders are $18 million over the cap right now, and they're going to have to cut salary. Paying a backup quarterback $11 million is not a luxury you have in a cap-strapped year, right? That's a luxury you have when you're flush with cap space. So the Raiders do have to make a move with Marcus Mariota if they're going to keep Derek Carr as their starter.
Yeah, sure. And again, if you're getting, what's the price for Mariota? Like, if you can get him for a day 3 pick, fine, whatever. I can't get excited about him. I don't think you go in. If you go into camp and Marcus Mariota is your unquestioned starter, that's a little gross. That's the reality of it. He's a backup for a reason. He's one of the better backups in the league, but he's a backup for a reason. We haven't seen him play at a high level consistently in a long time. I just, at that route, give me, again, the upside. I'm looking at upside, and the upside there is with the rookies. It just is. And you can do both. You can have Mariota and Mac Jones. You can have Mariota and Trey Lance, but it just feels like with all the reports we're getting that the Patriots, like Mariota is going to be the last quarterback to be dealt, right? He's probably going to be the last one to go. So last year, the Patriots grabbed the absolute last quarterback, right? Of the 32 primary starting quarterbacks, none of them signed later than Cam Newton. And now, again, you're going to grab the last quarterback. And that's not, I get, people will say it's value. It's not. You're losing. You're getting the last guy. You're going last.
Well, I don't know.
You're getting who's left.
I don't know if Mariota will necessarily be the last domino to fall, because the Raiders are set at quarterback with Derek Carr. I would say a team like San Francisco trading Jimmy G during draft weekend might be more likely, because they're not in a position right now unless
is Garoppolo
to make that.
Is a team outside of the Patriots, is any team acquiring Garoppolo to be a starter?
I right now, probably not, because a lot of teams are actually, it might be a rookie that they have in that position, but a lot of teams are feeling good about their starters right now.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. The Patriots aren't in that spot where, they have a guy who they think could be the starter, and you're going, like, if you're getting Mariota's an insurance plan, like, he's a great insurance plan, essentially what he was for the Raiders last year. But there's nobody else there. Again, you're the last team picking your starting quarterback. You're the third. I mean, outside of the teams for the draft, but that's, the Jets, they don't know who their guy is, but they know they're getting a guy. They know they're getting a real guy, right? You're the last team essentially picking your starter. You're 32nd, your last hand on the bat.
So here's my thought on Mariota. I've always been pro Mariota, and I'm going to continue to be pro Mariota. 2019 Pro Football Focus graded him out as the 12 out of 35 in terms of accuracy, right? This is a quarterback that threw with generally good accuracy throughout his career in Tennessee, threw really well in between the numbers as well, good anticipation, ball placement, timing, things like that between the numbers. And then on top of that, he still brings the running quarterback element that Cam Newton brought to the offense last year to some degree. So what you have with Marcus Mariota, in my eyes, is a more consistent passing Cam Newton, right? A guy that can still move, that can still run design quarterback runs, read option, QB type of runs down by the goal line if you want to do that sort of thing. But he is going to be a much more efficient and accurate passer down the field. In 2019, he was one of the best deep ball passers in the NFL. I think that surprises a lot of people when they hear that. But in terms of the charting, that's exactly where we were at with Marcus.
But again, what year was that?
2019, but that was the last full year of him as a starter. When was the last time?
I thought you said 2017.
Yeah, there you go. Carson Wentz was the 2017 is what we're all hanging our hat on with him. So I think it's only fair to look at Marcus Mariota and say, hey, it was only 2 years ago where this guy was a viable NFL starting quarterback. He can move around a little bit. He's got the athleticism. He certainly has. I understand what you're saying, that what we've seen of Marcus Mariota so far is a limited upside, but he was the number 2 overall pick in a draft at one point, right? So he's got a ton of talent. Right,
but I just
natural talent for the position for sure.
What is the best case? What is the upside with Marcus Mariota with the state this roster is in?
The upside is that you have an athletic player at the quarterback position.
Okay, no. I get that, but I'm saying, so like, how many games can you really win with Marcus Mariota? 9? You're right back. You're right back. I don't think he's not any more than 2 wins max different than Cam Newton. I think he's better, but
I don't think is any more than 2 wins better. Just if you put Marcus Mariota on the team last year, it's probably the same product, right? But if you get Marcus Mariota some help, I think the biggest thing is that
But you need to get him the help, and none of this is guaranteed. And I think there's a real chance if you bring in Marcus Mariota, you're 7-9, 8-8 again, missing the playoffs, and you're right back here. Except now you have $10 million tied up in this guy. I think you're going in circles.
You'd be right back with there, because this is a great point that we just put up on the screen about the system in Tennessee. They went into with Marcus Mariota, thinking that they were going to be Oregon, right? They were going to spread the field, run a lot of shotgun, use his legs. And then Arthur Smith and the Tennessee coaching staff kind of decided that we wanted to go more under center, more play action, and really amplify Derrick Henry as the best player in the offense. And that wasn't fitting Marcus Mariota's style. So in a lot of ways, I don't even know if Marcus Mariota was ever bad enough to lose his job, or if they just kind of went in a different philosophical direction with the way that they were going to run the offense in Tennessee. And ultimately, I think that whole example is a great example of Ryan Tannehill was the 8th overall pick in his draft. It didn't work out in Miami. They tried it for an extended period of time in Miami. He went beyond his rookie contract there. He finally moves on to Tennessee, and he gets into a great system fit. Now, the last 2 years, statistically, Ryan Tannehill has been a top 10 passer in the NFL. And they've made the playoffs back-to-back years. They went to an AFC championship game with Ryan Tannehill as their starting quarterback. So when I look at these things, I just look at, okay, what's the biggest – what are the different types of situations that we can get into? You can draft a quarterback, you can sign a quarterback, or you can try to get that guy that didn't work out with his original team but was a top 10 pick, the Mariotas, the Trubiskys, the Jameis Winstons. Who's the one that you want to save, right? Or Carson Wentz.
Right. I guess again,
Mariota is the one you want to save.
I guess again, well, Wentz was the one I wanted to save, but he's no longer an option. Right. I guess again, my point is I don't want any of those guys. It's not Mariota specifically. I just think with all of those guys, there's a reason that they are available. And it mostly has to do with ability. It does. Now,
I think with Mariota was confidence. Mariota lost his confidence in the pocket.
And that is a scary thing to me. Because a lot of guys never recover from that.
The Raiders. That's for sure.
A lot of guys never recover from the confidence thing. Again, what do I want to do? I don't want to rescue somebody. Okay. I don't want to be the guy that's taking a girl to prom just because her boyfriend just dumped her and I thought I had an easy shot, because you're going to have a bad night. She's going to puke in your car. That's what's going to happen. Not that ever happened to me, but
that sounded
my point being, like, you don't cheap out. You don't bargain at this position specifically. You don't. You either go all in on the risk, or you pay the true premium on the sure thing. I feel like Marcus Mariota is you're just hedging your bets and you're fine being okay. You're fine with, if you're signing Marcus Mariota, you're saying we're fine with our quarterback being just okay. You don't have the roster for that, and you're not in the division for that.
Okay, let's talk about the prizes then. All right, because I threw this out on Twitter today. I had some Trey Lance clips that I wanted to throw out there. Tanner James, up near the top of the chat here, asked us about trading up into the top 10 for a quarterback. If you want to talk prizes, then let's talk prizes, right?
Okay, yeah, let's talk prizes. Lance, here we go.
Justin Fields.
Let's play. Stack them up.
These are prizes, right? So the trade that I threw out there for the Patriots to move from 15 in range for one of these quarterbacks is obviously number 15, a 2022, first round pick, and a third round pick, which is basically the deal that the Chiefs made to move up to get Patrick Mahomes, right? It's the same deal that the Bills made to move up to get Josh Allen roughly as well. So that's the going rate right now to move up from the teens, middle teens, up into the top 10 for a quarterback. The question is that I have, I guess, is preference-wise, I mean, I think that you don't really necessarily have the pick of the litter, because I think the top three guys, Fields, Wilson, and obviously Trevor Lawrence, are going to go maybe even 1, 2, 3, right? Yeah. Like that's a very real possibility. Trey Lance, though, is the question: are you willing to take a risk? Because you said you wanted upside and you wanted a big move. Are you willing to take a risk on a guy that's only started 13 collegiate games? Because that's the only risk. Because his tape is absolutely fantastic. It's a sample size.
Right. I would say this, and this is kind of a cop-out answer, but, and I've said this before, I think if you're an NFL team and you believe a quarterback is the guy, there's no price you can pay that's too high, right? You mentioned that Patrick Mahomes trade the Chiefs made. At the time, people said they paid too much. They got ripped a little bit for that. Nobody's talking about that anymore. No. Nobody's calling that an overpay anymore. So if the Patriots believe that Trey Lance is the guy, then yes, they should absolutely do that. 100%. Whether they believe he's the guy or not, I don't know. But if they think he's the guy, and the issue is they don't want to surrender that draft capital, this is where I go back to with Mariota or any of these guys, Garoppolo, where it's the safe option. If you're afraid to surrender that draft capital and you'd rather risk a 5th-round pick on Mariota than 2 first-round picks on Trey Lance, even if you think Trey Lance is going to be good, that just doesn't make sense. That's not how the NFL works. That's not how you win games. You could do that when you had Tom Brady at other positions. You don't have Tom Brady. If you want to get back to operating that way and taking those bargains and operating on a budget and being shrewd, then you need a quarterback. Marcus Mariota is not going to make you good enough that you can operate that way. If you think Trey Lance can, and some people, and I think you're in this boat, some people believe Trey Lance is good enough or will be good enough one day where you can operate that way. If that's the case, if the Patriots believe that's the case, then yes, no price is too high. Then this year's first, next year's first, Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson, whatever it takes, go get the guy.
Right.
So yes, I haven't seen enough of Trey Lance, and I have a ton of trouble watching the FCS tape. So I personally don't have an opinion on whether or not he can get to that level. I'll admit that. I'm not going to say things I'm not informed on.
He is spectacular.
If you believe he can get you to that level where you can start bargain shopping again because you're so good at the quarterback position, then yeah, you spend. Absolutely. And I would say the same thing about, by the way, I would say the same thing about Justin Fields if he's in play. I'd say the same thing about Mac Jones. The ceiling probably isn't as high, but if you think Mac Jones can be, you compared him, I think Matt Ryan was your comp for him, right?
Yes, that's my ceiling comp for him, yeah.
So, but again, if you think he can beat Matt Ryan, no price is too, well, I don't think you have to pay. I think
the most realistic outcome for Mac Jones is someone like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr, but in a great world, I think that he could potentially get into Matt Ryan territory. Trey Lance, though, is, to me, look, there's inconsistencies on his tape, but you could stack together his good plays against any quarterback in this class.
He's not going to make you that good right now, but I'm saying by the end of his rookie contract, you're going to be in a spot where you can bargain because you know you're going to need to pay him a ton of money. Like, if you believe that's the case, then yeah, no price is too high. Yes, I would much rather give up a first for a rookie quarterback I truly believe in than a 5th-round pick for Marcus Mariota or always hurt Jimmy Garoppolo. That's an easy one to make.
The question is and this is sort of where it comes back to bringing back Cam too as well for me, is are you using those quarterbacks for 1 year to let Trey Lance hold the clipboard? Because in his best interest, it probably does make the most sense for him to sit a year like Patrick Mahomes did. So if you do that and you bring Cam back for 1 more year as the bridge to with Trey Lance learning behind him, and maybe that's something that you can do, right? But Trey Lance, the thing that makes him so appealing to me is that when I watch quarterbacks, watching the feet is such an important element to quarterback play because it all starts with your feet. If you have bad feet, you're not going to be an accurate quarterback. You're not going to be able to generate as much velocity on the ball and drive the ball down the field the way that you want. He has extremely crisp, extremely efficient drops. And then on top of that, he has all the arm strength in the world. I mean, we're talking about a quarterback at North Dakota State. They're dialing up slot fades from the far hash and having him throw 60 yards down the field. And that's the type of offense that they ran. So a lot of his completion percentage numbers, a lot of those types of things I think are really slanted because he averaged over 10.5 air yards per attempt. This was a deep passing offense. So obviously his completion percentage is not going to be as high as Mac Jones is, who's throwing tunnel screens all day long, right? So that's the difference in the player. And I don't even want to talk about the fact that he can run because he is such a good passer that I'm willing to do it. And the other thing is I posted this one last on Twitter today is that ability to extend the play and throw on the move and throw outside the pocket is a quality that NFL quarterbacks are starting to really, that's becoming something that you almost have to do at this level. Unless you're going to be Tom Brady and efficient and Tom Brady good from the pocket, you have to be able to move around a little bit and throw the ball from under duress or throw the ball, while you're moving to your right, like Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson can. If you can't do that, or Russell Wilson, if you can't move like that and throw on the move, it's really difficult to be as good as a guy like, unless you're Breeze or Brady or somebody like that. They don't grow like that anymore. They don't come around very often.
Like Kyle Trask is the closest to that, I guess, but he has his own flaws. You brought up a couple interesting points there. First off, and this is a debate I've heard nobody have, and maybe we can do it now, maybe we'll do it later. Would you rather take Jones at 15 or trade up to get Lance? Because obviously you're giving up more to get more. The other thing you brought up is again, if it's, I'm bashing on Mariota or and these guys, if you're trading for Mariota to teach Lance and hand over the keys in 8 weeks or at the latest next year, like that's fine. That's great. I have no problem with that. But then the problem is, and this is just Cam. I have no doubt that, or it's Cam and Garoppolo. If it's Mariota, I think Belichick hands off the keys. If it's Fitzpatrick, Belichick hands off the keys. If it's any of these guys, right? And we talked about this on Tuesday, and you can go back on the CLNS Media YouTube page or the Patriots Beat podcast, wherever you get your podcast, you can hear this conversation. I don't have faith in Bill Belichick to bench Cam Newton. I don't trust him to quit Cam Newton because I haven't seen him do it before. And if he re-signs him, he's doubling down after Cam was arguably the worst quarterback in football. So that's why I'm hesitant to have Cam as the bridge. Or Garoppolo. I don't know that Belichick could bench Garoppolo. I think Garoppolo would be a fine bridge guy.
Right.
At the contract, no. But if he gets cut, I think he'd be a good bridge. The problem is, I don't think Belichick would see it that way. I think if he brings in Garoppolo, he's bringing in Garoppolo to revive Garoppolo's career and try to win with him going forwards.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that one with Garoppolo. That's why, and I'm going to write this at some point, if the move is to bring back Cam, then you trade up for Trey Lance, right? You bring back Cam for a year.
But you don't. You don't if you're just going to try to plow forward with Cam and ignore everything that happens, including what Cam does on the field.
Well, no, but I think that's the best option, I think, for them moving forward is bringing back Cam, drafting Trey Lance, who's basically, I wouldn't call him young Cam. I think Trey Lance is closer to like a Dak Prescott than he is to a Cam, because I think when you look at him throw the ball, he has such a smooth delivery that you know that the accuracy is going to improve once the system improves it. You know what I mean? Like when he's not asked to throw go balls all day, his accuracy is going to improve.
So why wouldn't you pair Mariota with Lance then?
Because I think Mariota falls into that Jimmy G category. I think Mariota is like, you're trying to revitalize and save this guy's career. If you look at what happened to Mariota when they traded for Ryan Tannehill. His confidence torpedoed, right?
That's fine. Like, I'm bringing him in under the assumption that he's a teacher, not that he's winning me games.
I just
he only has 1 year left on his deal, so it's a very easy out after that.
Right, but I feel like if you're bringing in Mariota, if you're bringing in Jimmy G, I think you're trying to fix those guys and make those guys work long term. Whereas if you bring back,
I think it's a personal thing with Belichick and Jimmy G. He doesn't have that personal tie to Mariota that he has to Garoppolo. That's why I'm bringing that up about Garoppolo.
That's fair. I really like Trey Lance. I like Mariota as an option too. I think we both like them all better than Cam at the moment.
There's very few guys, and maybe we can do this with the questions. There's very few guys that I'm going to pick Garoppolo ahead of, or Cam. Cam I'd pick ahead of Garoppolo, but like either of those two, you're going to have a hard time naming a quarterback that I'm going to say give me Cam or give me Garoppolo.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to some of these other questions. We're getting a lot of Mac Jones questions, even though we have asked or answered tons of questions.
He's good. There's nothing wrong with them taking him at 15. He's a good player. He's going to be a good player. That's the answer. That's all it is. He's chicken soup. He's fine. He's good. It'll make you feel better. It's not a 5-star steak dinner, but it's not going to gross you out either.
It's you know me. I like Mac Jones as a player. Do you want to take Derek Carr in the 15th overall pick? That's the question, right? Because that's who he's going to be. I
think he can be a little better. I think he can be better than Carr. And you know what? Derek Carr, you know what? I would be okay with that. I think that if you get a guy who can start for your team and win you ball games and have you competitive for 8 to 10 years, win a couple divisions, you could do a lot worse at 15. Again, the thing I like, and I've been going ceiling. The thing I like with Mac Jones is
that's the best part is you've been going ceiling, and then you're like, give me Mac Jones, which is a floor problem.
But I guess what I'm saying is I would rather Mac Jones, like, if you're going to trade up in the draft, you want ceiling, of course. But if it's like, again, I see Mariota as spinning your wheels. If you're going to spin your wheels, give me the 23-year-old who's making 10 times less spinning the wheels instead of the 27-year-old who's been benched twice. Spinning the wheels like that. That's where I'm at with the floor with Mac Jones. Is just that, I'd rather go to the draft, get a guy who's I don't think is going to be a bust, and you can use that salary cap and spend around him and maybe put a team together like that, like what the Tennessee Titans have, like what the San Francisco 49ers had in 2017 when they went to the Super Bowl despite having a bad quarterback. Like, I think you can do that with Mac Jones. You can't do that with Mariota because he makes more money. It's only a 1-year deal, so you have to reset again next year. You just can't do that with him. You can do that with Mac Jones.
Yeah.
But then again, I would rather than either of them. If you think that Lance or Fields or whoever's the guy, go get the guy and go for it. But if that's not what they're going to do, then give me the 4-year window to try to build something around a quarterback who's okay, then a 1-year window around a quarterback who's making $10 million who might be okay.
Yeah, I like Mac Jones as a player too. I just think 15's a little bit too rich, just a little bit, because I think you need to put that player in an optimal situation, right, for to get the most out of him.
But you have the cap money to do it.
Sure, but I think
if they draft Mac Jones,
you need to surround Mac Jones with a lot of talent for Mac Jones to hit his ceiling as a player. Whereas with a guy like Lance, he might be able to elevate the thing a little bit more on his own.
And that's what I'm saying. If Lance can do that, trade up and get Lance. But if Mac Jones doesn't succeed because there's a lack of talent around him, it's not because the Patriots took him at 15th. It's because they didn't spend the necessary money in free agency despite having the cap space.
Right. That's fair. All right. Let's get to some of these non-quarterback.
Yeah, do we got any non-quarterback ones?
We really wanted to do non-quarterbacks, and of course we did 30 minutes on quarterbacks. Of
course.
Pretty classic. There was one good question. I'm trying to find it. That was about Rondell Moore versus Kadarius Toney, which we both love Toney as a player. The hesitation with Toney is obviously that he has some off-field red flags, right? The situation down there in Florida, he didn't get in any legal trouble for it, but
that's not a red flag for me. I really don't put much stock in that. I think it was an unfortunate circumstance.
You think it's an unfortunate circumstance that he had an AR-15 in his back seat?
He had. It was registered, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was registered or not, but
I mean, it's Florida. You can take guns wherever you go. Let's wonder.
Not get into a gun conversation.
Fair enough. Something doesn't totally add up there for me. That's not. There's some guys with some actual red flags. Micah Parsons to me has some actual red flags.
Sure.
I don't put. Is it something to consider? Sure, but I'm not. I consider it more like the Richard LeCount incident with the motorcycle. I just think it was wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah, I think the issue that you have with it is that if he is the first guy that you pick in the draft. The Patriots, they just drafted a kicker with a 3%er tattoo. So I'm not going to sit here and say that they're immune to drafting guys with a couple of character concerns. But if you're going to make that guy the face of your draft class, then that becomes a different conversation. Now, Rondell Moore is a guy that barely played in college because he's hurt all the time. Right.
So wait, we're talking about this at 15. I assume this was the second round pick.
No, a trade down or a second round.
I'm not taking either of these guys with the first pick. I think they're either you trade back into the first round or you take them with your second pick. I wouldn't take either of these guys with the first pick.
Neither would I. But I love. Kadarius Toney on tape is. There's nothing not to like about the guy, right? He's explosive. He's fast. He's great with the ball in his hands.
He's just raw. That's it.
He's like Tyreek Hill, like a little Tyreek Hill and a little Alvin Kamara, rolled into one player. That's
and a little Jacoby Myers. He's a former quarterback, so he's got that mental element.
How can you not like that? The player himself, fantastic prospect. But let's Odell Beckham Jr. Anything, because if there's one avenue that you could get a star like OBJ in here, bringing Cam back, OBJ is known one of his best friends, right? They did that whole documentary together after Cam signed with the Patriots. And they have a really, really, really strong bond between those two guys. You could definitely convince OBJ to come play with his buddy Cam. The question is do you want that pairing? Do you want OBJ isolated from Cam, or do you want them together? Do you have any interest in that altogether? That's a home run type of move, though, right? That's a big swing.
No, it's not, because Cam Newton's still your quarterback, and it makes it that much harder to bench him if things go wrong. I'd rather have Odell Beckham without Cam. Give me Odell Beckham with the rookie. Give me Trey Lance, and then go get Odell Beckham so that I know my rookie quarterback who I'm trying to develop has a legitimate stud wide receiver to throw to. Don't Odell Beckham and Cam. If that doesn't work out, you can't get out of it. That's it. You're locked into that.
Right.
It is what it is. So, yeah, I don't hate the idea of Odell Beckham. You need talent. He has talent. There's no way around that. But him and Cam, I'm already worried about them just blindly following Cam and just putting their head down and powering through no matter what happens. I think if you trade for Odell on the pretext of you're going to come play with Cam Newton, and then Cam Newton comes out and throws 8 picks in the first 3 weeks, you can't move on from him, because then Beckham's going to be a problem.
Right.
So,
right. That's the issue, is that if you do that, you're hitching your wagon to it. That's your ticket, right? That's your combo. And the other thing is that you do kind of worry about Cam targeting Odell Beckham 250 times. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but like if those two guys are playing together, then you are kind of agreeing to the fact that it's going to be the Cam and Odell show. Odell is going to get targeted, maybe might lead the league in targets if he's healthy for the entire year. So that's I think the question is, are you ready to get into that sort of marriage where it's also kind of on two guys, right? The whole offense is going to run through those two guys, and the whole locker room is probably going to run through those two guys as well. I want to talk about some of these defensive players in the draft as well, because I think we're kind of sleeping on this a little bit of the Patriots.
Well, weren't we going to do defense next week? Wasn't that like this was going to be the offense week? Next week was going to be the defense week. We can still do it, like, because we God knows we've had this conversation 20 weeks in a row.
Right. But. So that's the question is, I think that in classic Belichick form, he could easily zig when everybody else thinks that he's going to zag and take a defensive player in the first round. These three guys, Kwity Paye, Micah Parsons, Patrick Surtain, all three of them are good players. My guy, Zaven Collins, is not on this list, who I would like to throw into that hat as well.
Well, I feel like you can't have Zaven Collins on the list if Micah Parsons is on there.
Right. So I guess the Parsons Zaven Collins chat is a debate is actually a really good one, I think, for
and Nick Bolton too. Let's not forget Nick Bolton.
I would like to see him in a trade down scenario or maybe an early second round pick. I'm not sure if I'm taking him in the first, but I like Bolton as well. But out of these three guys that are, just because this was the question that was asked to us, who are you taking out of this group?
Oh, Surtain, that's easy. I think I posted my first round mock draft today. You can check it out on 985thesportslove.com. I have Surtain going fourth to the Falcons. Granted, I didn't really do trades. I think they ultimately trade down, but like, I think there's a real chance he's the first defensive player off the board. If he's there at 15, that's no question. Because the other thing you can do if you do that is you take Surtain at 15, suddenly Stephon Gilmore is wildly expendable. You trade him to the Packers, who need a corner opposite Jair Alexander, and then you trade him for 29, and then you're back in the first round, and then you're talking about maybe Kadarius Toney, right? Or if you really want to go quarterback, maybe Kyle Trask there. Maybe you go and get the linebacker there. Maybe there you get Zaven Collins. Maybe there you get Nick Bolton. That's an easy one for me. Surtain by a lot. I think Surtain's the best defensive player in the draft. He's the most NFL-ready defensive player in the draft. That's for sure. So
he's got a lot of really smooth technique skills. The way that he plays corner reminds me a whole lot of Stephon Gilmore, because he likes to
I thought you were going to say Patrick Surtain Sr.
Well, yeah, that too. But he likes to stay square at the line of scrimmage, right? And he's going to wait till that he's very, very patient and with his technique, and he trusts his technique, and he's going to be willing to allow that wide receiver to make the first move, right? And then he's going to react to it. And he's got the length and the reactive athleticism to be able to kind of sit back in his chair and say, okay, you make your move. You cut in, you cut out. I'm just going to react to it. Very, very sticky corner. Very, very good man coverage skills. I know everybody's like, oh, we don't need a corner. We don't need a corner. But that's a
kind of do.
You do want to keep rotating guys in, and you do want to keep it fresh. And with the situation with Stephon Gilmore, with J.C. Jackson's contract situation, that's things that you have to sort of entertain, I would say, is those types of moves. Micah Parsons really scares me at 15. He's a great player, right? But he really scares me, not because of necessarily the hazing incident, but this is a guy that you mentioned, off-field red flags. This is a guy that trouble has kind of just followed him everywhere that he goes. Like in high school, he's got into a few dust-ups, and he comes to Penn State and he gets into a few dust-ups. And the maturity level, I think, is a big question mark with him, right? Is he ready to be a pro football player? Is he ready to take on that type of responsibility and be a guy in the defense? Be a dude. I don't know. He's a great player for sure, but he's got a lot of concerns to me for sure that I would be hesitant to take him at 15. And that's why I've gotten so into Zaven Collins, is because he's another linebacker prospect that could really fit that need that they have there. And it doesn't have quite the same sort of background and checkered past as Micah Parsons. It's not like Micah Parsons has done anything like egregiously bad, right? It's not Aaron Hernandez, right? But it's just,
no, but it's little things add up, and where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing.
Right. And it's a lot of little things where like he was in this fight, in the cafeteria. Like, well, why is he constantly getting into fights in the cafeteria? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
It's just like, I don't know. It's just a weird kind of situation. And there's going to be a lot of NFL teams, I'm telling you, like that are not going to have him on their board, that are going to completely scratch him off, mostly for the hazing thing, obviously. But that's definitely a scenario.
Wait, can we backtrack real quick? Somebody had Somebody brought up Caleb Fairley just because we were talking about the corners.
Yeah.
And I think Fairley fits more in that group with Payne and Parsons in terms of like he's a lot more realistic at 15 than Surtain is. Fairley stands out to me because if you look at what the Patriots have done over the last couple of years, they are bringing in guys in bunches who changed positions, right? Jacoby Myers, Gunnar Olszewski, Rashad Berry. Look, not all superstars, but guys who, you could even kind of throw Kyle Duggar in there, right? Was a deep safety move to box safety. They seem to really like these guys. And there's a ton of these guys in the draft this year. So all the guys I just named were outside of Duggar were UDFAs. Maybe they get a little more aggressive with the strategy. Caleb Fairley was a quarterback in high school. And
he was a wide receiver. He got recruited to Virginia Tech as a wide receiver.
Right. So he's played quarterback, receiver, and now corner. And he's a very good corner. He's going to go. He's going to go in the top half of the first round. I just see that in terms of the Patriots' recent trends. Isn't that something you see as being super enticing to them? That this guy is a corner with a quarterback's brain, and then just because I wrote about this when I did my Patriots mock draft on 98.5thesportson.com. There's a way. They'd have to make some trades. They'd have to get some bounces, but there's a way where the Patriots' first 6 picks in this draft could all be guys who changed positions at one point, and it wouldn't be totally ridiculous. You look at a guy like Chaz Surratt, who was a quarterback his first 2 years at UNC before moving to linebacker. We talked about Kadarius Toney, was a quarterback before he moved to wide receiver.
Too, I think, as well. Kadarius Toney.
Well, they kind of moved him from quarterback to offensive weapon.
Right.
And then, but yes, he's played some running back. A guy like James Hudson is an offensive tackle from Cincinnati who's going to go early on day 3, was originally recruited and played defensive line at Michigan. There's a ton of these, and I'm missing some, but there's a ton of these guys in this draft this year. Damar Hamlin, a safety from Pitt, was originally recruited as an outside corner and still plays some outside corner. There's a ton of guys in this draft who have changed positions either as freshmen in college or later or during their college careers. Keep an eye on those guys because the Patriots have shown an affinity. Again, Jacoby Myers, Gunnar, Rashad Berry. They're bringing these guys in. Michael Onwenu even. They're bringing these guys in who have changed positions.
You forgot about this one.
Who did I forget?
J.C. Jackson.
What was J.C. Jackson?
Wide receiver. That's what made.
Did he play wide receiver at Florida?
He played wide receiver in high school and was recruited as a wide receiver to Florida.
I actually didn't know that. I knew he was the top recruit in his class. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the reason why the first thing that stood out to me with Caleb Farley, when they said that he was a converted wide receiver, I was like, well, they fell in love with J.C. Jackson, right. Converted wide receiver. Big reason why that's so good is because they have great hands, great ball tracking skills. They basically run the route for the receiver and make plays on the ball like they're a wide receiver. That Caleb Farley is a great player. He's a little bit raw because he has that the position switch, and he hasn't had a ton of experience at outside corner, but he is twitched up. He's a great athlete, and when you see players like that can change directions, that can fire from flat-footed stances or a back pedal or a low zone or something like that. Those are players that usually have really good ball production, interceptions, pass breakups, are guys that can really fly and really change directions and suddenly burst into explosive plays. That's where you really stand out over Patrick Surtain, in my mind, with Caleb Farley, is that twitchiness and that athleticism. Patrick Surtain doesn't quite have that level of twitch, of explosiveness like Farley does, but Farley is definitely a lot more. You got a lot longer to go before he's a finished product, but he's definitely a guy that stood out to me because of that converted position thing, and it's obviously worked out really well for them to have a converted wide receiver in J.C. Jackson come in and play corner. It's definitely worked out really, really well. Let's talk about tight ends because we talked a little bit about wide receivers. Tight ends, I think this is a really interesting conversation because the Patriots might have a chance at Kyle Pitts. They might. I don't know if they will, but they might. I don't know how.
I have it. In my mock, I have him and Waddle there at 15.
So I don't know how crazy we are about a rookie tight end again, given the history of the position. Now, Kyle Pitts is a different animal, maybe, right? He's a generational talent. But even a guy like a TJ Hawkinson didn't burst onto the scene right away in Detroit. So you do kind of feel like, all right, is that the best usage of that pick? Some of the guys that we like in free agency too, but Pat Freiermuth is another name that everybody throws around there as well from Penn State. Where do you want them to go with the tight end position though?
So I'm gonna approach this because you'll have the film aspect of it. I'm just gonna approach this totally from a roster building point of view, right? An asset management point of view. You have first off, Matt Lacoste getting cut. I don't know that. I'm not reporting that. It's an assumption. Okay. So you're gonna have 3 tight ends all on rookie contracts. Because Izzo is entering the fourth year, I believe, of his rookie deal. And then obviously you have Asiasi and Keene.
Right.
Just roster, even if you cut Izzo, roster construction wise, if you take a tight end in this draft with a day 1 or 2 pick, rounds 1 through 3, you're just hand cut. Like, that's it. Those are your tight ends for the next 2 years, at least, probably 3, unless you want to eat some dead money between whoever you take, Asiasi and Keene. So that, to me, like, I wish they had just passed on tight ends last year, knowing that this class was coming, because it's a great year to get a value tight end. That being said, it's tough. I think Pitts is a generational talent. Ordinarily, I'd say pass on tight ends until round 4 this year. Your roster isn't built to take it. Pitts is that good. He also might be a wide receiver.
He's an offensive weapon.
Right. Well, we hear Bill Belichick call like Travis Kelce wide receiver. We hear him call Mike Gesicki wide receiver.
So we would call Kyle Pitts a wide receiver because Kyle Pitts, he does have some streaky blocking tape. You know, you can find plays. Like, I can go ahead and pick out plays from games where he's blocking with his hand in the dirt and he's getting the job done. Is he Rob Gronkowski? Obviously not, but he does get the job done. But what Kyle Pitts does is he runs routes, and especially at the line of scrimmage, his route releases are better than any wide receiver in this class. Like, he is some of the best route running technique out of any of the pass catchers in the entire class. Tight end, wide receiver, running backs, throw them all in there. And Kyle Pitts is one of one, maybe with only Devontae Smith as like a close second, or maybe.
I actually like what Julian just said. Pitts is the offensive version of Isaiah Simmons. That's actually really good.
Yeah, he's kind of like that. I mean, I've heard Darren Waller, you've heard Travis Kelce, obviously, but to me, what separates Pitts from those types of guys is his ability to play above the rim. This is a player that really has a large, massive catch radius, and he can really go play basketball against guys too. He doesn't have to win with quickness and with speed in the middle of the field and stuff like that. He can actually get open in different ways. And that's a really valuable thing to have. Now, if we're going to go free agency, the one name that I do
so wait, real quick on the draft again. So I would just say, if it's not Pitch, I see people throwing out the kid from Penn State, the kid from BC, right?
Right.
If you don't take Pitts, I think you have to wait until the 5th round to take a tight end, because you're handcuffing yourself with the contracts. Otherwise, Trey McKitty from Georgia, Florida State transfer, is a guy I really like for them. He's kind of in that range. And I saw somebody say Keene doesn't count as a tight end. He's a fullback. Maybe if
that's not how they're viewing him right now.
Right. If the team's willing to move on from Jakob Johnson and put him there, fine. But he's not as good of a blocker, and he's coming off a neck injury. So you have to count him as a tight end right now. Also, if they want to add a fullback, if they want to make a change at fullback from Jakob Johnson, it's going to be Ben Mason. That's it. That's the whole discussion. It's Jakob Johnson or Ben Mason. That's it. They're not moving Keene there.
So the guy I want to talk about in free agency is actually somebody we haven't necessarily talked about, and it's Robert Tonyan from the Green Bay Packers. He's a restricted free agent.
Him.
He's not an unrestricted free agent, but I think we need to start talking about some of these RFAs a little bit more. I have tried to talk a lot about Tim Patrick as much as I possibly can, the wide receiver.
Another guy I like. Yep.
Tonyan's another one, because what you can do is the Green Bay Packers are not in a position like the Patriots where they have $70 million in cap space. So if you can load that contract up in year 1 for Robert Tonyan, you can make it really, really difficult for the Packers to match an offer sheet for that player, especially in this cap-strapped year, and you can actually get the player. Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith are great players as well, but they're going to be, I think, over $10 million a year in the open market. Tonyan, I think you can get for a little bit less, and he's that vertical pass catcher, right? He ran up the seam all day long in Green Bay, and that's the type of guy that I think that it could really use, because the stuff, within the line of scrimmage or within 10 yards and whatever, right? I can take that at the tight end position. What I want from my tight end is a guy that can get up the field and get up the seam. And I think Robert Tonyan can definitely do that. And
so who do you like better? Somebody just mentioned this name, Tonyan or Everett, because Everett kind of fits that mold too.
A little bit. I like Tonyan better. I think he can offer more as a receiver. I think Everett might be a little bit of a better blocker, but I think Tonyan is a better all-around player. And that's to me is thinking outside the box like Bill Belichick, because we can sit here and talk about Hunter Henry until we're blue in the face, right? We do it every single week. We talk about Hunter Henry, but in reality, the Patriots, they're not bargain shopping by any means, but they might not be A-list shopping either, right? They might not be a team that attracts Hunter Henry. It might not be a team that attracts Allen Robinson, but these types of guys like Tanyan and Tim Patrick are sort of under the radar players that I think you can see it if you really know it. You know what I mean? If you really dig into it, he was a really effective player for Green Bay. So I would like to put his name out there. This is a really interesting question too.
Yes. Okay. I was hoping you picked
Trent Williams. Any interest at all in, because I haven't really done any deep dives. I've done deep dives into tackles in the draft, but not in free agency necessarily, because I didn't think that they would go there, but maybe they would.
And I mean, we know Trent Williams works. Right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Trent Brown, because he might be available too.
Yes. So Trent Williams is the other Trent.
Right. I got them, they were both on the Bay for a little bit. I would take Trent Williams. I mean, I think he's a good option. You then decline Isaiah Wynn's option. Maybe you can trade him. Maybe I don't think he'd fit at left tackle, or at right tackle, but maybe you try him at right tackle or something. I think if you can, after getting a quarterback, you need a quality left tackle. You do. I know you're under the impression, a lot of people are under the impression that might be a direction they go in the draft. I do think they're looking to upgrade from Wynn. I don't think he's been as reliable as they'd like, both in terms of his play and just staying on the field more specifically. But yeah, I wouldn't rule that out. So the Trent Williams one's interesting. I'm curious what you think of the Trent Brown one. Because Trent Williams, yes, he's like the third or fourth best left tackle in football.
He might be the best left tackle in football at the moment. He's right up there with David Bakhtiari and some of
I put Bakhtiari at one, but I'm curious what you think of the Trent Brown.
Trent Brown would be interesting, because I mentioned this earlier with the Raiders. They are well over the cap. They're in the red right now. They're going to be about $18-19 million over the cap, and they're going to have to cut salary. They have two guys in Colton Miller and Trent Brown at tackle, who, when Colton Miller was on his rookie contract, it was a luxury that they were able to afford. Now that Colton Miller, they're going to have to probably pay him. That's the question. Now, the draft is absolutely loaded at tackle, loaded. Yeah. You can get a tackle anywhere. So that's why Trent Williams kind of interests me just a little bit. If they don't believe in Isaiah Wynn anymore, that bringing him in, similarly to what they did with Trent Brown, where you bring in the player for a year, you draft a guy behind him to develop for a year, and then you let that player take over in his year two. Maybe they could do something like that, where they bring in Trent Williams or somebody like Trent Williams for a year, have him anchor down left tackle, and then they draft a guy in the second or the third round who's the developmental future of that position for the Patriots. I think Isaiah Wynn's a great player, right? I think that he's a great player when he's out there. Great might be a little bit strong. He's a good player when he's out there. I've basically lost all faith that he is going to be able to stay healthy at this point for an extended period of time, let alone 16 plus games. I don't know how you continue to keep that guy as your starting left tackle, knowing that there's no way that he's going to stay healthy. There's just no way he's going to stay healthy. And maybe 1 year you get lucky and he does, right? But that's
we'll know
year.
We'll know when's the option deadline? It's before free agency, right? The fifth-year option. The fifth-year option.
That's usually sometime in early March as well, right? The tag deadline's March 9th. I know that.
Right. I guess my point just being we'll know how they feel about Wynn pretty soon, because his option's on the table this year, that fifth-year option. So, if they don't pick that up and there's no talk of an extension, which I think we would have heard by now if that was the plan, that was the plan, I think we'll get a pretty good idea about how they feel about Wynn long-term here in the next couple of weeks.
Right. When you have Dante Scarnecchia doing some scouting for you, you just grabbed Michael Onwenu in the 6th round, you could get a tackle that can play for you on day 3, maybe, even with the way the Patriots can scout offensive linemen. So getting a guy that can come in as a stopgap, like they did with Trent Brown a few years ago, is definitely not a bad idea at all. All right, that was a good hour, mostly quarterback talk. Unfortunately, we're gonna really
next week, Tuesday and Thursday, both shows. Next week, defense.
Next week, if we gotta put some money in the jar, take a drink or something like that every time we mention a quarterback. All right, there's no we're not going to talk as much about quarterbacks next week, but definitely make sure to check out the CLNS Media YouTube channel for our podcast on Tuesday, where of course we talked a lot about quarterbacks again, and that's another show that you guys can check out if you like this show. We'll be back next week, same time, same place, for another live Q&A, and obviously cover the latest with the Patriots. And I think we're going to start hearing some things here soon. Next week would technically be the NFL scouting combine, would be towards the end of next week, going into early March. So we're getting to the point of the off season now where people start talking, right? The agents, the players, the impending free agents, we start to hear some chatter. So hopefully we'll be able to get to some more concrete options and examples. But until then, signing off for Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for listening, guys.